And we are live. Hello, everyone. Carlos here. How is everyone? On my fourth or fifth installment of what's happening in archaeology. What's up in archaeology? 11th of April. Well, last week I talked about how fossils are created, the process, the geological process that leads to fossils appearing, and we know that from that fossils are quite a rare phenomenon. That it needs really special conditions for the material to be preserved to get to our times, our days. Today I want to talk about how we get you guys have seen a lot of forensic shows like Bones, CSI, a few other shows like that, where they basically get a skull of someone, they find the skeleton completely destroyed or burnt or whatever, and they just have his skull, and then they try to recreate his skull, reconstruct his skull to get his identity. Well, that is an actual science, and it takes place because in each I'll just talk about modern humans for now, but it's Homo sapiens sapiens, but it can be transposed to all the other hominins. We know the exact thickness of muscle, fat, skin, its bone from the skull of a human skull. We know how much, for example, how much muscle, fat, and skin there is in our forehead, in our the back of our heads, in our cheeks, in our lower jaw, etc. It's measured. It's not something that hasn't been already studied. From autopsies from the 18th centuries, it's been done, and so we know the exact composition, how muscles are attached to the skull, to etc., how they interact, and from that data, we can then apply it in the reconstruction of skulls. I will do just one article. I think this one's quite a good article. I'll just share it. I'll start at the top. It's quite a good article. It basically is the history of it, how we got to what we are, how we get there. It's from Natural History. It's a 2007 article, but it's still quite pertinent. Basically, you guys should read it. All the source material are in the description. So, as usual, I'm going back into how before we got to forensic reconstructions that we have now. Before artists, paleo artists would imagine, from looking at the skull, they could try to imagine how the hominin looked like. And we have a portrait here of an Australopithecus afarensis, which was basically Lucy. This is Lucy, in fact. Shit, am I sharing this? Why am I not sharing this? I should be sharing to everyone. One sec. I might have gotten the wrong. Should work now. Yeah, it should work now. Sorry about that. I clicked the wrong button. But anyway, as I was saying, Here we go. This is the portrait of Lucy, the famous Australopithecus afarensis, which was unearthed by the Leakeys. Yeah, everyone. I think you guys by now know who the Leakeys. If not, I will do a video in the future about them. They are very famous anthropology, archaeology family who have a foundation. Have made a foundation in to preserve such finds and excavatings in Kenya and Tanzania, but they're based in Kenya. And anyway, we have here the drawing of Australopithecus afarensis from Diki in the Afar region of northern Ethiopia. This is like the famous Lucy, not actually Lucy. I should have read this before I presented it, talked about it, but it's the same thing. Artists before from the 19th century, 1800s, 1890s, 80s. You can see lots of artist impressions of how hominins looked whenever there was a discovery. And we have here Australopithecus afarensis, and it's close enough to what the actual hominin looked like. This article basically tells the story of how the paleo artists developed their tools and how they could more accurately produce likenesses of what they were trying to restore. It's basically it's a good article. I suggest everyone read it. Below here we have some Ardipithecus ramidus. They were from Ethiopia as well. The complete skeleton was discovered in 1994, and it's about 4.4 million years ago. So it would have been almost contemporary with the Australopithecus afarensis, but they were different. They're different species. We have here Bosei, Paranthropus bosei. I've talked last week, no, 2 weeks ago, or the last time, or the one before, the difference between Bosei. Yeah, it was the 2 weeks ago when I talked about the evolution of the human brain. This one would have represented what, if we took an example of our species, Homo sapiens sapiens, representing Australopithecus afarensis, or the chimpanzees, this one would have represented the gorillas. So they were Paranthropus bosei was basically a plant eater. He's even called a nutcracker man by, again, Mary Leakey, paleoanthropologist. And in Tanzania, Olduvai Gorge, a very, very prominent fossil find. You can go read about how all the distinct, how they were reconstructed or else. But coming to this part, before I get to this part, it's how they will reconstruct from a fossil, how they reconstruct reconstruct the face of the hominin. Neanderthal, some of the end results. We have a Neanderthal here, and you can see the artists. We have Gary J. Sawyer on the left and Victor Deacon on the right. They are both paleo artists, sort of speaking. Now, how do we reconstruct a skull? Well, first of all, we have to find one. Talked about how fossilization works. After it's dug up, it's carefully treated so it doesn't deteriorate, because they are and preserved as much as possible. Sometimes you have to, the skull's broken up so much, you have to reconstruct it physically to become a skull from all the fragments of the bone, of fossil and bone that you find. Um, After you get that, you never use the original. Obviously, you have to make a mold. First of all, you make a positive mold, then you make a negative mold. First, you cover up the the actual fossil. You can use material, quite a neutral material like what's that plastic? That's that rubber type thing. It is basically a rubber material, silicon, for example. Yeah, that's it. Silicon. Sorry, just watching other notes, reading other notes. Silicon. You make a mold over that, then you make a cast of it. That's what you get. You get you then fill it up with a material, possibly foam or plaster that was used in the early part of the 20th century. And then after you do, you can make a mold positive. The cask, after you cast it, you can get faithful reproduction. But now these days, we can use 3D printing, which is even better. You first laser scan the skull, introduce the data, and then you have a 3D printer produce a completely perfect copy of the original. That's what's going to happen, and it's happening now. After you do that, this is the first part. The article here reads, to reconstruct an extinct hominid, the collaboration of artists and scientists first make a urethane cast of the skull and the jaw. That's what I was saying now. But we can use 3D printing now to do that. This is an example by the artist Victor Dieck. I showed you him before. And physical anthropologist Gary Sawyer, which I also showed you before. This is a 400,000-year-old Neanderthal skull. And Heidelbergensis skull, which was the ancestor of Neanderthals and possibly even us. But I'm sure, but I agree that he's us, our ancestor as well. After that, they know the measurements. They know how much, for example, how much muscle will be around his nasal area, around his cheekbones, around his eye sockets, around his skull, and around his jaw, and the back of his jaw, of his skull. They know. These are anthropologists, physical anthropologists, biologists, and anatomists, especially anatomists. They know how much the thickness of each layer. What they start off is they first finish reconstruction of the skull. Any sections, missing sections, they reconstructed with obviously. First, like I said, first they make a mold, and then they fill in the missing parts, which it's known by anatomists. They know that the face was this way, the eye. They just continue the eye socket as it is, etc. It's easy. I've reconstructed not fossils. I've reconstructed clayware, basically pots and bowls. So I know that it's an exact science. You have to actual millimeter measurements. Once they do that, they then can start filling in parts. Like here you have some of the deepest muscle layers. They use clay because it's a good material to work with, and strips of clay representing strips of muscle to an extent. They sit in one glass eye, obviously, to get measurements, see how the thing's going on, and then they start surrounding with muscular like tissue. So they know how much muscle fragments are. And the next phase is, as they add layer upon layer, it starts to build up. they can estimate the size of the nose from the nasal cavity. This part here, this has been shown from anatomists studying it for studying skulls of hominins, how big us, in fact, and not just us, but hominids as well, chimpanzees, gorillas, living apes, they have calculated. It's almost like a mathematical formula. They know the exact how much percentage of muscle is in a certain part of the face. So once they get to that part, it gets built upon layer after layer. Here they've calculated the size of the nose from the surrounding bone attachments. They've set both eyes in place, and then they're sculpting the superficial muscles which are complete. Then as they keep building it, then they can get to the actual face, because they know how big the nose will be, how the lips will be as well, because it's all there. How the muscles, for example, on top of the brow ridges, Neanderthals and Homo heidelbergensis had a suborbital, which means they had a ridge above the eye sockets. They knew how big the muscles were attached to the jaw by the actual size of the jaw. And because they did not have chins like we do, we are the only apes that have chins. We are the only hominins that have chins. Till now that we know of, we don't know Denisovians or the missing hominin that is whose DNA has been found in the Andaman Islanders. So that's something which I will be looking forward to when they discover more remains of Denisovians, or they may change the classification to Homo sapiens Altai, because he was found in the Altai cave. The same way as that they did that to Neanderthal, he was found in the Neander Valley. He could have gotten, I've read an article where Neanderthal could have gotten a really weird name, named after the cave in Gibraltar. The Latin name or the local name for that area, which had nothing to do with, it would have been weird. So I won't go into that. So then after that, they can start adding the skin. We know, anatomists and paleoanthropologists, paleo artists know how thick the skin is around the whole face. From the measurements taken by from all of the living apes, from humans themselves. So and comparative anatomy, they have estimated, not estimated, they have actually calculated how thick it would be. So this is not this is not guesswork. This is actual science, empirical science. There's no guessing there. It's a fact. Then they add the skin, which in this case would be a silicon-based skin covering type thing. They can also obviously cover it with clay and then make a mold of it, of course, rubberized mold, which would be easy to add other features, like the next, we get to this one, which then they would start adding the color. Here it says the rubber mold is made from an entire reconstruction. The new cast is created in urethane rubber. The skin tones are painted on the finished cast. How do we know the skin tones? Well, it's easy. We know that the more, this is something which I will cover. I've already covered on my race debunking video, which I'm going to redo very, very soon. I'm just writing up the script. I have the points. I'm just writing up the script. But we know the further north from the equator you go, the lighter your skin becomes. It's just biological fact. It has it occurs in from north from the equator to the north, from the equator to the south. With even the Australian Aborigines, the extinct Tasmanian Aborigines and even the Victorian Aborigines had a slightly lighter tinge compared to the northern Aborigines. The central Amerindians, which are the American Indians, which the correct term is Amerindian. The more south you go, the lighter the skin color is, and the more north you go, also the lighter the skin color is. The Eskimos, the Inuit, that's the correct term again, are lighter skinned than the more central. So then the Incas and Aztecs would be, and they are. They're slightly darker. The science is there. But it's still a bit controversial. It has something to do with generating vitamin D and so on, and protecting against cancer, etc. So, but we know that the skin color gets lighter the more north you go to the North Pole and south as well. Then after that, they would add the facial hair. In Neanderthals, we know the color of their face. Their facial hair, their hair. We know them from genes that they've extracted. We have actually mapped the genome of the Neanderthals. Why? We have been finding in the Eurasians Neanderthal DNA in Homo sapiens. So we know if their hair color was light, dark, or ginger. Actually, Neanderthals in Europe, not so much in the Middle East and in the Far East up to the western Siberia, where Altai cave is located, which seems to be the most eastern extent of Neanderthals. The Northern European Neanderthals had quite a high quite a statistically relevant population of gingers, and everything that comes associated with red hair, light colored eyes, most likely, very pale complexion. Who knows, even freckles. We haven't gotten to that part yet, but I won't. That is a good question, Carlos. Why are there no Oriental gingers? Maybe the gene didn't get that far. Could be because, like I said, the Neanderthals had the ginger gene. That's almost the name of a rock band, the Ginger Gene. Anyway, and up until the central Siberia, after that, that gene isn't expressed. I have to look up, but if there's a natural, like in the Australian Aborigines, they have they are very dark skin color. They're very very dark skinned, colored skin, yet they can be blonde, natural blonde hair. That it sort of muddles up the racial divide a lot. Not just the Australian Aborigines, but the Southern Indians, who also share the common gene traits with the Australian Aborigines. But you do have, I think, gingers in Papua New Guinea. So, Carlos David, I think there are gingers in Papua New Guinea, natural gingers, by the way, and so they are Oriental. But I will confirm that. That must have been really progressive, Gunny. I would listen to a band called Vaginal Labo Gingers. Yeah, why not? Getting back to, I wish I have a couple. I've linked a few, more than a few videos on the description. I want you guys to check them out, because they are very, very interesting, and how they reconstruct these hominins. This is Heidelbergensis. I've shown. Just stop this. Okay. I've shown before other of our the facial reconstructions of our ancestors, just so we can get back to how it was. Here we go. Let's see the species. I'll share again. The Smithsonian Institute is awesome in showing this, and you can see how some that have been reconstructed and other, like this one, Ardipithecus carbide, still only a drawing, because well, they haven't completely, many reasons, but maybe they haven't completely found an example that they can fully formed example that they could reconstruct or not. But that was one of them. Go back to this. Ramidus, Australopithecus ramidus. He's also another short-lived hominin that lived in East Africa. When we get to the more closer ones like Afarensis, Lucy, and so on, we have here the facial reconstruction of how she looked. This is how Australopithecus afarensis looked. They walked upright. They walked like us, basically. The gait was not very distinct from our gait. Their feet would not have been like the chimpanzee's feet, which is sort of a second type hand. It would have been closer to our feet, with the thumb fused into the foot and extended forward to provide balance. That's what our thumb does, provides balance. Another swig of beer. Other ones, let's go to Homo heidelberg Neanderthals. This one, like I said, Europe, Southwest, and Central Asia. This one, particular one, was probably one of the Neanders, the original one that they found in the Neander Valley. But they've since found that they had the genes to gingerness. So did that mean that they did not have any souls? Who knows? He wouldn't be very out of place in modern society. The only difference, the only thing you would consider, said, oh, slightly big-nosed, slightly short, ugly man. But I tell you, he would not be out of place in today's world. He would have been super muscles. His body would have been like like Arnold Schwarzenegger type muscles. I've talked about how their muscles were so massive that they bowed, that they caused their legs to bend, to bowed legged. You know how cowboys from riding their horses sort of developed that bowness, that shape. They, from the massive muscles that they had, did the same. It had the same effect. This is my favorite cousin of ours, and he is not just our cousin. He is a race of humans. Us, Neanderthal, Denisovian, are three different races, and then there's the fourth, the Andaman Islands people have the genes of. And I will be talking about. I'm going to do a video explaining race again, because people just completely get it wrong, and especially that stupid idiot Rachel Dolezal, who thinks she can be transracial. Unless she identifies as Homo neanderthalensis, then she can be transracial. If she identifies as black, she's not transracial, or Asian, or East African, or South African, or North African, or Amerindian, or Southeast Asian. On all those ethnic groups, which is the correct term one should use, not race, because there's no human races. We are the human races. If she identifies that, she's identifying as a human, Homo sapiens sapiens. She's not a transracial entity, being, whatever. She's a moron. So I'll talk about the term, because it's what the term race that confuses people. So yeah, I think this stream's getting a bit short. If you guys want, I can start a new one and just invite you guys. We'll have a talk about all sorts of shit. What do you reckon? I'm a bit bored. And this one was just really a short video on how to reconstruct cranials from the bones. And check out the description. I have, as usual, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 sources. And okay, I'm gonna end this stream. I'm gonna start a new one, and I'll invite Gunny. Gunny, you're on. I'll open up. Where do you want? I'll send you on Minds if it's okay. Oh, you can't. I'm going for a second ride. Oh, okay, man. We'll leave it for another time. Well, I'll end it then. One of my more short videos. I don't expect to get many views from this. I'm fine about it. I will never be as famous as Tim Blake at Motivator Opinion, or Michael Rowlands, or Mr. Potato Head, Keith Logan, Kevin Logan. That's that dumb cunt. Anyway, so thank you for coming on, people. See you next week, maybe.